and welcome to episode 12 of the Melbourne AWS User Group podcast. Once again, we'll be discussing the news here today, this time for February 2021. My name is Arjen and I am joined by my good friends Jean-Manuel Becker.
Hello, thank you for listening again. Very excited to be here to share the news.
And Guy Morton.
Hi everyone, I'm short and sweet.
Excellent. Before we dive into the actual news that people care about, I want to share one little thing, and that is that I started a new podcast. So it's called Arjen Without Sleep, which features myself as well as sometimes, occasionally, the cries of a little human. As I discovered that talking about the cloud makes my newborn daughter fall asleep. So I decided to record that, and you can listen to those recordings on ignore.me/sleep. That is ig.nore.me/sleep. And a link to that is in the show notes as well. So if you're interested in hearing short, about 10-minute episodes where I talk about a service or something else AWS related, go have a listen.
And just keep your earplugs handy in case the cries begin.
I'm trying to edit those out.
No, you should leave them in. That's part of the colour.
It depends a bit on how loud they are.
Yeah.
Some things are in there, some are not.
Trust you to use your judgment on that one, Arjen.
So you're doing subliminal training for your daughter to be an engineer, is it?
Let's give her every advantage she can get.
But I don't know, because she's falling asleep, so that may not be a good sign.
That could just be that I'm incredibly boring, and everybody who will download the podcast will also use it.
Hey, that could be a new market. That could be a new market. Learn AWS while you sleep with Arjen. You could start it out with a few sort of rain noises at the start, and you could just bring the rain noises in and out as in between phrases. I reckon that'd be good. Be good. I'd listen to that. Might learn something.
Shall we get started on the actual news then?
I think we probably should. Yes.
Cool. Let's start with the notice that there wasn't that much exciting news this month. It really seems like we've entered the low point after reInvent, where all the cool stuff was pre-announced. So now there's not much to talk about. Still, we got a couple of things in Sydney. New instance types. That's always fun. And in this case, it starts with more Graviton 2 instance types. The M6GD, C6GD, and R6GD.
Yes, the cool instance based on Graviton as usual. The new ARM64 developed by AWS. You get high-speed, low-latency storage added to that environment, and there is several size from the M6GD Medium with 1 vCPU, 4 gig memory, and 59 gig of SSD NVMe, up to the 16 extra large with 64 cores, 256 gig memory, and 2 terabyte of SSDs, and then the metal version as well. So if you need to use a fast local storage for temp files or for pushing data, then that's the best way of doing it. And they go from 5 cents an hour to $3.6 an hour in US dollars. So that's pretty decent. And the T4G macro, which is the original Graviton. So if you want to do some testing before paying the big bucks on the M6, you can still, until the end of March, this month, 2021, have 750 hours of free T4G macro to test your code on it.
Nice. So these GD instances are the ones they've got attached physical storage as opposed to the other ones that do not.
That's correct. Yes. So this one, you can have EBS and NVMe SSD attached. And depending on the size of the instance, the bigger you grow, basically that SSD size doubles in size.
So presumably that's optimized for workloads where you need the storage to be sort of very tightly attached to, you want the storage to be very fast to access.
Yeah, temp file, database, stuff like that, or batching. When you copy a lot of images locally and then process them fast on Graviton.
Nifty.
So another instance type that we now got is the M5ZN instances, which are, again, 2 suffixes, one for the 100 gigabit per second networking, which is obviously really nice if you need to do some HPC or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is what they bill as a high-frequency processor, highest in any cloud. Basically, I think they go to something like
4.5 gigahertz Xeon. Yeah, it's a new scalable Xeon, and apparently it provides 45% better single-threaded compute performance using the Intel VTX. So if you need to do virtualization or non-virtualization environment on top of, because you have a metal version as well with 48 CPUs and 192 gig memory, then you know, you're going to have much better performance. However, when you compare them with an M5, you got 45% better performance, but they are 60% more expensive in cost per hour. So you need to, you know, use them for the right thing. And that gives us more choice with AWS. Before, it was more SSDs attached. Now it's a better network interface. So pick the right instance for your right workload.
So many instance types.
Yes.
Who remembers when they did their first AWS Solution Architect exam and there was only like 8 different types, 8 different families or something?
Yeah, the IM, the R, and then everybody was doing the mistake of M being memory one. No, that was the wrong answer. Yeah, I remember very well. You had to know the instance type, but now they're still, following the same pattern, so you can guess it. But yeah, there is a lot of instance.
Yeah, it's the same pattern, but they just keep adding letters to the end.
Extra suffixes, yeah.
So I'm looking forward to the M6GDZN instances. Bare metal, of course.
Yeah.
But bare metal, there is a market for VMC, VMware on AWS, going to VMware, but I'm saying there could be a market now with using KVM or even, for people who want to do it with Kubernetes bare metal, running that on top of cloud and using the maximum of an instance if you can use it. So a lot of bare metal instances around provided by AWS and now in Sydney as well. So it's awesome.
Yep. And the last one for Sydney is the new 100 gigabits dedicated connections for Direct Connect. So now that's available in Sydney and a couple of data centers up there, I think.
Yeah, it's only on Equinix. So if you need to build that with redundancy, we still need to have a 1 gig connection somewhere, or maybe a trunk. Doing LAP, you can still have 4 or 10 gig together as a backup with 40 gig. That was the maximum speed before. Now you can have a 100 gig if you are connected to Equinix SY3. The cost much more expensive, obviously, per hour. It's
AWS.
Well, you pay for what you get, right? So the 10 gig is $2.25 an hour and the 100 gig is $22 an hour. So, it's almost the same.
Wow.
When you look at it and convert that in Australian dollars per month, is going to be $21,000 to have that port. Then you need obviously your router on your side and your ISP and stuff like that on top of that. But, if you are already in co-location in SY3, having a 100 gig pipe, pretty nice, moving your data from your data center to S3.
Yep.
And other cloud providers were providing 100 gig before, so it's good that AWS is catching up with that.
It's not common to see them lagging behind, so, yeah, absolutely.
Then let's have a look at the serverless section. Really only 2 announcements here.
Mm-hmm.
Guy, I think out of us, you are the one most interested in Lambda support for Node.js 14.
Am I? Look, obviously, this is just going to happen, isn't it? They roll them out. No, I was actually interested in the other announcement more so, the Amplify Flutter. That looks like a neat new capability. If you're familiar with Amplify, so Amplify's got support for React and Vue, and it allows you to build cross-platform, essentially, iOS and Android and web apps using those technologies. So now they're supporting Google's Flutter library. What do you want to call it? UI framework. So that's a nice new capability that's been brought to Amplify, which has had some nice updates over the last, so I'm going to say 6 months, and it's a pretty sweet sort of setup now.
Yeah. And for people who don't know, Flutter is a language framework, whatever you want to call it, aimed at building cross-platform applications. So it works for your iOS, Android, but also Linux, macOS, Windows. And the idea is that it builds native binaries for them, so it's not like you end up with an Electron app, but sort of like real native capabilities.
So that's good to see.
Just coming back on the Node.js 14 was not exciting for anyone. I think the good difference part is it can run on Amazon Linux 2 now into Lambda with the latest generation of Amazon Linux, and Node.js 14 going to be supported. So it's a long-term support release and will be supported until April 2023. So you have kind of 3 years to enjoy using the version 14. And so obviously Lambda is always supporting the latest version and the long-term service release version. So that's a good option, I guess, to upgrade to 14 right now.
Yeah. I just think you lost a year there, JM. We're in 2021 now.
Oh, yes.
2023 is only 2 years away.
2 years away. Yes. Apology for that.
Nevertheless, it's always good to see new versions.
Yeah.
Yeah, the endless march of progress.
But I'm afraid that was it, really, for serverless.
Boo.
Well, let's see if containers has a bit more. Following the idea of the march of progress, EKS now supports Kubernetes 1.19. The fun thing here, though, is that they also specifically mention EKS distro, which is the
open source
version. So that's nice. So it's still lagging behind mainstream Kubernetes, which is up to 1.20 now since December. But yeah, that's one minor version is not too bad. And obviously this means that another version will no longer be supported, which is 1.15. I believe it will be dropped in May, and it will have the usual process. If you don't upgrade your cluster yourself, it will be done for you. I recommend not having that happen to you because EKS can be a bit finicky and you'll have some services that are out of date running on your clusters. So do your own upgrades. You've still got several months for them.
Some good advice there.
Yes.
As you know, containers, aren't my special subject. Well, I don't have a special subject really, but I did notice the config support for Amazon Container Services. That seemed like it was likely to be a good thing.
Yeah, so you can start recording now the change happening in your cluster for ECS cluster, ECS service and task definition, and a bit of EKS as well for the cluster side. And AWS released 2 config rules that you can start deploying and monitoring your cluster for EKS endpoint with no public access. So to ensure that your EKS is not facing the internet, and then the EKS secret encrypted as well to ensure that all your secret are encrypted with KMS and envelope encryption. So a couple of help there for the management of your cluster and recording the change who are happening. Yeah, good addition. The more in config, the better.
Yeah, it's interesting though to see that one of the 2 rules they released basically checks for something that was the only way to spin up EKS clusters at the start, having a public endpoint.
That's correct, yes. And don't forget the tag on your subnet, otherwise it won't work as well. You need to tag all the subnet properly, otherwise the node won't know where to go. So they might end up in the public zone again. A couple of other announcements. EKS now support authentication with OIDC, compatible identity providers. So instead of using just kubectl and the different authentication you can have, it was supported before with IAM, but now you can start linking LDAP and all sort of different authentication to access your EKS cluster. There is a blog as well mentioning Cognito, and there is a demonstration of how you can plug in your EKS cluster with a Cognito authenticator. So pretty cool. Again, catching up on the competition on this one, but it's good to see.
Yeah, and the other thing that you can almost see as catching up with the competition is for AppMesh, which now supports mutual TLS. AppMesh is AWS's service mesh offering, and like other service meshes that you may be more familiar with, Istio is probably the big player there. Mutual TLS is important for some workloads, and now AppMesh has ticked that box, and you can use it both for ECS clusters, EKS clusters, anything that AppMesh supports, which is great. And in an interesting change from other MTLS solutions that AWS implemented, especially the one for API Gateway, is that you don't need to use a private CA for this.
Yeah.
So you can generate your certs any way you want and store them. I believe it's in Secrets Manager.
So again, that really cool because a lot of our customers were seeing Istio as the only alternative to be able to do MTLS between microservices. AWS released, I think, a couple of months ago, API Gateway with MTLS. Now you can do Kubernetes on the MTLS. That's with the app mesh and NECS as well. So that gives you kind of end-to-end encryption with mutual encryption. So for product like open banking or online banking application for the FSI market is very, very important. So you can go native now. You don't have to scratch your head with Istio for months to try to make it work.
It sounds like somebody had some experience with that.
Yes. Let's move on. Fargate can increase default resource as well. So interesting. I don't have any customer of this size, but you can go from a 500 launch concurrent task to 1,000 now. So it's the service quota is massive on ECS with Fargate and EKS with Fargate as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because they increased the count to 500 not that long ago.
Yeah, and double it again. So
I'd love to see who uses that kind of number. This is just the default that everybody gets. It's not like what you increase. So yeah, I guess they really want to sell those Fargate containers.
And they feel like very comfortable, I guess, to scale with many, many customers, and they have the hardware to back it up. So yeah, interesting. Let's move on to EC2 and VPCs.
Yep, so there we have those bare metal instances again.
Yeah, this time M5N, M5DN, and R5N and DN and bare metal as well. So this one, 100 gig, you have the N to recognize them, and then a couple of Ds as well for the storage, and the Intel Xeon processor again to be able to do elastic fabric adapters and HPC, ML workload, all of that. That's going to be the instance you will need, and you can have obviously EBS attached volume, ELB in the front, and all of that. So yeah, more instances again.
Yeah, and more speed increases for elastic file system as well, EFS. Didn't they do something on that very recently as well? I think they doubled the max throughput?
There was a write throughput increase. Now it's a read that they triple again.
That's right.
Read throughput increase to 300 meg per terabyte. So that's becoming a very good service. I remember at the beginning of that service, we had to store fake terabyte of data to make sure that you have that perfect bandwidth.
That's right. Burst. The old burst credits.
Yeah. But now it's out of the box, and the beauty of it is no additional cost. So you don't have to do anything. If you have an existing EFS, it will automatically be bursting to 300 meg now. So nice addition.
Yep. So that's also just for the read. It's not for the write. That tripling.
Yeah, but a lot of application going to be using read, like for ML, for even ECS and websites and all this kind of plethora of application who benefit from having centralized shared storage will benefit. Even EKS and Lambda.
Yep. Speaking of EFS, you can now use them on the new Mac instances if you upgrade those to use macOS Big Sur, which is also now a possibility. I'll probably assume that new instances will be running that.
Yes. So you can use the native NFS4 to mount the file, or you can install with the Homebrew package manager a specific Amazon EFS client to be able to connect to that EFS storage and do your testing.
Yeah, that's the same client, I assume, as for Linux.
Yeah.
So one that I actually am really happy with, even though it seems like such a small thing, is that you can now use local time zones for scheduled scaling of application autoscaling.
Yeah.
As we are here in Australia, using UTC was always a headache.
It's surprising how hard it is to do time zone math in your head, isn't it? Unless you're doing it all the time. I used to have to do that all the time. Yeah, and it's almost as bad as calculating lat longs and all that sort of stuff. It's that's all hard as well. That's going to make life easier.
Not to mention the half yearly let's change everything again by an hour because we go into out of daylight savings.
Yeah.
You probably want your scheduled events to move with daylight savings time, wouldn't you?
I assume so.
So if your peak is at 6 p.m. or whatever, yeah, you're going to want it to move.
Yeah, so you specify the canonical name for the time zone, which I assume would just be the Australia/Melbourne.
Yeah.
Or things like that. So, and that should then automatically adjust to daylight savings.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It's in the dark. It automatically adjusts for daylight saving time.
Ah, good.
I mean, I haven't tested it yet in that because that is something you can only check every 6 months, and we're not quite there yet.
Yes. One of the announcements that I thought was kind of nice in this section was the application load balancer now supports application cookie stickiness. So previously, if you wanted sticky sessions on an ALB, the cookie was generated on the ALB. So you had a special ALB generated cookie that would do that. And now it can use a cookie that's generated by your application to do the same stickiness. So basically, once you get a session on one of the instances in your cluster, you'll get sent back to that same instance by the load balancer on the basis of the cookie that is set in your application rather than the load balancer, which kind of gives you some more granular control over that. Yeah,
especially that was creating problem when you have a couple of or two ILBs in chain or in sandwiches. Then the first cookie was getting lost and the application cookie was getting lost. So it was creating some problem now. That's so you can rely on your application to do all of that. You still have the same kind of monitoring from the ILB level. So if your node become inactive, then that cookie will be discarded and that node won't be hit again. You will need to obviously re-authenticate, but you will go to another node. The ILB health check still works.
Yeah,
and no extra charge, all free.
Yeah, so I think that'll make a difference for a bunch of use cases. There'll be people quite happy about that, I think.
Yeah, well, in many cases, I think for many people, it means they can finally move from classic load balancers. Well, it's just the classic ELB already supported this.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, nobody at AWS wants to admit that they'll still exist.
What about the scaling history? I thought that was probably potentially useful in some circumstances. The scaling history for deleted groups.
Yeah, just nice to have. I guess you can specify another additional parameters to describe the scaling history and see the auto-scaling group who have been deleted. Yeah, probably a nice management tool to have.
Yeah, for sure. But nothing else. I guess the backup events and metrics in CloudWatch. Maybe that's kind of useful. That's useful too. But yeah, I mean, it's a month of not super exciting. So we have to kind of in a normal month, we wouldn't even put that on the list, would we? But or maybe we would, but we wouldn't necessarily talk about it. But it feels like it's a slow month.
The backup event metrics, I guess, is good. I had some customer who asked me, how do I know my snapshot worked? And they want this type of monitoring tool, even if they're supposed to work, so that you can track the created, the running, the completed, and the failed job, and for all the different products you have, and set up alarms and stuff. Yeah,
that's right. Then you can drive some alerting off the other end of that. So if something fails, at least people will have the comfort that if it fails, they'll get a SMS or an email to say it did. Yeah.
There is traffic mirroring, which is now supported on non-Nitro instance.
Selected.
Yeah, AWS was going all Nitro now. There's still non-Nitro instances, like C4, D2, G3.
It reminded me of that the X1 instances still exist.
Yeah, X1, X1E, yes. So traffic mirroring is supported in these old instances now. Bit weird, but yeah, they make the effort of doing that. It's still not supported on T2, C3, R3, and I2. If you run this instance, you should upgrade though, because an I2, R3, all of that is so old now. Yeah. Let's move on to DevOps.
CloudWatch Synthetics supports Amazon API Gateway in API Blueprint. So this is like sort of making it easier to set up a synthetics to monitor your API gateway that you've got set up.
Yep.
So you can basically, as I understand it, you can kind of derive a synthetic check from like a Swagger, your Open API definition. Is that correct? Is that what I'm reading here?
Yeah.
So just sort of it's a way of quickly being able to set that up for that particular use case when you've got API Gateway.
And Synthetics is, of course, the service that automatically checks if your website is still up and running.
Yeah, uptime monitoring. Yep. So that's cool. That's a nice feature.
Yep. X-Ray Insights is another one. Basically, this means that X-Ray can now more easily detect events, and in the interface it shows both past and ongoing events. Quickly, if you've used X-Ray, you're familiar with the spider web of your services with all the circles, and now you just get details on, hey, this had issues or expecting issues.
That's anomaly detection, isn't it? Is it an ML-based thing?
Yeah. It doesn't specifically mention that it's ML, but yeah, it's anomaly detection, and I'm pretty sure that under the hood, it uses some machine learning. It's similar to the same service for Lambda and containers.
Yeah, the relentless march of ML into every corner of our lives.
Yep. So on the upside, one that I am quite happy about is delegated administrator for CloudFormation stack sets. So you could already have your stack sets defined in your root account of your organization, and then have them automatically deployed when you add new accounts, and just have it all managed through there without really needing to touch it much. Obviously, this was against best practice because it was the root account, as JM likes to point out every other episode.
Yes, the master account is not the best place to do DevOps, yes. So luckily this month AWS has been adding that option, that you can nominate another AWS account inside your organization to be able to be the host for all these stack sets you want to push to the rest of your organization. So very nice addition there, yeah.
So JM, did I just hear you say master account?
Yes. What?
Get with the program, man. It's not a master account anymore. It's a management account. We don't say master anymore.
Well, it used to be billing, right? And then we changed it to master account. It could be a root account, but let's say it's the organization account now.
Yeah.
At the correct space. Control Tower still use the old model, and hopefully maybe we can see a new version of Control Tower going to use that new delegated administrator account to be able to push the stack sets. That would be a nice addition to Control Tower.
Obviously, we love Graviton 2 instances, so it's good to see that Code Build now supports that as well. Nothing really exciting to say about that other than, yay, you can do it. The Graviton processor is more green and it's cheaper, so let's start using it when you can. And it's available in Sydney.
Even better.
Let's move on to security. Unless you want to talk about Cloud9 launching visual source control for Git.
I think you just did. That's the announcement.
That's it. Yeah, you can now have the Git tools installed on your Cloud9 instance terminal.
It's the visual part that's new, just like in every other IDE that you can use Git directly from your IDE instead of the command line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, as a command line purist, I don't see the point in this, but you know.
Let's move to security. We have Guard Duty introducing a new machine learning domain reputation to expand threat detection and improve accuracy. So you're going to start detecting domain who look suspicious before they become suspicious. So that's interesting. And for that, there is a couple of reputation alert, malicious domain request, abused domain request, suspicious domain request, and Bitcoin domain request. So if your EC2 instance start calling DNS on this suspicious domain, then you will get a Guard Duty alert to say maybe something wrong on this machine is happening right now.
So I'm not really clear on. So I mean, I always think of these suspicious domains as being, essentially a blacklist of names. So why does ML get involved here? Like, are these domains being obscured somehow? Is there some patterning that's are they guessing it? Well, sorry, guessing. Are they using a machine learning model to how can they determine that a domain might be a Bitcoin domain? How
would you do it? I mean, for me, I will look at the IP address matching the domain. I will look at the registrar who registered the domain. I will look at the name itself. It's like a really weird domain.
You can't use the name of the domain surely as a piece of information to determine whether something's likely to be a Bitcoin domain. I mean, unless it goes, leapbitcoinhacker.com. Okay. Oh, I think that's a Bitcoin domain. But yeah, I'm interested to know, understand how it's doing that. Is it doing it by looking at, other services have pointed to this domain in this context, so therefore we think maybe it's we think that's the sort of behavior that we'd expect from a Bitcoin domain. Are they using, the massive data perhaps from the fact that they've got a huge network of workloads all busily doing things to look for patterns, these sorts of patterns. So when something becomes identified as a Bitcoin domain, they have a bunch of essentially machine learning training data to say that's what that looked like. That's the sort of traffic you saw.
I don't have the answer for Guy, but what they say is learning domain reputation model that can categorize previously unseen domain.
Yeah. So it'd have to be something like that, wouldn't it? It'd have to be, what sort of patterns of tracker are we seeing to this domain? How does that match up against other domains that we've seen in the past that were, abused or spamming or whatever?
And don't forget, guard duty, I guess, is used all over the world by AWS. And if they see, patterns happening in other account or who were proven suspicious, then let's stop that Route 53 request.
Yeah, interesting. Again, machine learning. It's creeping into every corner of your life.
More machine learning, yes.
Maybe sometimes for good or for evil, but it's coming anyway, regardless.
Yeah, more machine learning with Amazon Macy, who can now support cross-account sensitive data discovery by scanning S3 bucket in other accounts and filtering by object prefix.
Yep, and I think one of the things that people will appreciate is improved pre-scan cost estimation, because a lot of people have had bill sticker shock from Macy, right? So that's probably a feature that they needed to provide for people to feel more comfortable with letting Macy loose on their buckets.
Yes. And pick the bucket you want to use to be able to do the scanning. So you have the first gig free per month per region, but then, the cost is quite high when you start scanning terabyte of data.
Yeah. I have to give AWS credit here for using the word slew in their announcement. They announced a slew of new capabilities. Fun fact, I didn't know before today, but slew was actually a form of the word slay, to kill. So slew is kind of they're killing it.
Yeah, I have to say though, I think the Amazon Macy team here clearly did not get the memo from AWS that every tiny announcement needs to be its own blog post.
That's right. Yeah, someone's gonna get sacked. Like, there's 4 announcements there, and you did it in one. You can just imagine Darth Vader choking someone to death for this. Yeah.
Okay.
VPC endpoints for Cloud HSM. So you don't have to have any a NAT gateway if you're reaching out to your Cloud HSM now?
Why that didn't exist before? I mean, Cloud HSM is supposed to be the most secure stuff you want to run, and you have to go through the internet to do it?
This falls into the category, didn't it always work like that? Which is a category we started, I think, a while back, didn't we?
We talked about it, but we didn't actually do anything. No,
that's right. We decided the Nanos were more fun. But yeah, surely it always worked that way. No, it didn't. So now it does. Or now you can at least do that. Oh, but the announcement I thought was kind of fun. Maybe just because it helps me at the moment. But was the WAF adding support for JSON parsing and inspection. Did you guys look at that?
Yeah. That's. I think that's good, especially when you put that on top of API gateways and stuff like that. When you put a lot of JSON stuff.
Absolutely.
However, you need to know that only the first 8K is scanned, not the whole payload. So you need to be sure that you...
8K's a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Stop whinging, JM.
No, but you will say, we'll scan the whole payload and to see if there is anything. But if you had to... so they recommend to have WAF rules going to block anything bigger than 8K to make sure that the content of that payload is getting scanned through the WAF rules. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I learned something today as well. This JSON pointer syntax. Had you come across that before?
No.
So there's a whole syntax for basically defining what keys you want to access inside a JSON payload, and it's you can read the RFC if you want to, if you're interested. You won't be interested, but anyway, it basically it has a backslash. That's how you kind of mark out the thing you want it to look at. So you can pull things out and write rules based on the JSON pointer syntax.
Okay, very good. But WAF getting better and better, yeah. So use WAF when you can.
Yeah, which is in a lot of places now because you can use it with CloudFront, ALBs, you can use it with API Gateway and AppSync.
Mm-hmm. And we designed something for a customer who has two WAF, one on the CloudFront level, IP reputation and generic stuff, and then one more specific on the ILB as a source for the CloudFront with very specific rules and very granular stuff for protecting the application.
And AWS calls that defense in depth, right? So it's part of the well-architected. That's what you should do. So multiple layers.
Data storage and processing. I know that the first one on the list here, JM, is one that you've been very vocal about in the past that you wanted it.
Yes, I mean, it's a massive improvement for people who want to access S3 bucket from on-prem. So it's S3 now support AWS Private Link. In the past, you have S3 gateway endpoint who are free. You set up that in your VPC, but it's a routing mechanism to S3. So you had to have an EC2 instance to talk to that environment, so you couldn't point your on-prem application to that S3 endpoint and access S3. So you had to go through the internet or do a private VIF, a public VIF, or other type of mechanism. Now with interface endpoint, you set it up in your VPC and you have a private link mechanism to access S3. So it's pretty cool. Able to process 10 gig per AZ, so you can have multiple endpoint. You can create multiple one as well. The only thing I don't like is the way you need to do your CLI command and specify the endpoint in every of your commands. So when you want to hit for example, from your CLI, AWS S3, this file black to my bucket, you need to specify the endpoint. And the endpoint DNS can be quite a long version, and then probably you don't know it. So you need to do -- endpoint URL, specify the endpoint URL, and then your ls command or your copy command. So it's all right, but it's much more complicated than I was expecting the product to be. But now you don't need proxies anymore. You don't need all sorts of different tools to be able to copy data to S3 quickly from on-prem. You can use direct connect, private VIF, straight to the endpoint.
Cool.
Speaking of S3, under the category small is relative, Amazon S3 on Outpost adds a smaller storage tier. You can now, for your Outpost, have an S3 that is only 26 terabytes in addition to the existing 48 and 96. So yes, 26 is smaller, but it's still quite a bit of data.
Well, when you have your Outpost, you need to pick between EBS and S3 if you want an S3. So the more you set up to S3, the more you lose on EBS. So that makes sense to allow a smaller S3 storage. And if you want a snapshot on your Outpost, you need to have that S3 set up to be able to store the snapshot of your EBS volume into that S3 Outpost. So yeah, good addition. I can't wait to see a one OU Outpost and play with it. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
How much S3 storage do you think you'll be on in the
the one you?
Version?
I don't know.
So something else we've heard of that people are actually happy about is RDS for SQL Server supporting always-on availability groups for Standard Edition.
Oh, yes. Again, that's sort of in the category of didn't always do that for a lot of people, isn't it? I think a lot of people are surprised that they couldn't do that, or outraged that they couldn't do that.
Well, there was mirroring before, and that was the process RDS was using for Standard Edition, where Enterprise Edition could use the availability groups. Now that's been brought to Standard Edition, but you need the 2919 SQL Server version. And now you have a standby replica, and you can point your client to the listener endpoint instead of pointing it to the replica itself. So you're going to have a faster failover when one of these AZ disappear. Yeah, that was possible on Enterprise Edition before. Now it's brought to Standard Edition. Microsoft said there is a couple of limitations using Standard Edition, and is to have only one database replicated. So I'm not sure if RDS apply that rules as well. But if you have multiple databases on your RDS, then you still will need to use Enterprise Edition. Standard Edition will replicate only one database, apparently, to be tested.
You'll get back to us next time with having tested that by the sounds of things.
When a customer, provide that, yes. There is a limitation of licensing as well using Standard Edition, so check with your Microsoft rep for that.
Always with the licensing restrictions.
We have Amazon Aurora Global Database Support Managed Plan Failover.
I think that sounds moderately exciting.
Yeah. Well, especially we have a new region coming up in Melbourne, right? So we might be able to use this global database system.
And it's only 5 years away, going by your maths.
No, end of 22. End of 22.
And how many years away is that?
Yep, a year and a half.
Okay.
Amazon Global... Amazon Aurora Global Database, it's a single database can span up to 6 AWS regions for fast disaster recovery, and you can have typical latency between region under 1 second, which is pretty nice. So now with the managed plan failover capabilities, you can really change your region and your host and test your kind of failover between region and make sure that you have that connectivity working and that failover working properly. So instead of waiting for suffering an outage, you can plan that failover between region. There is a nice blog about it if you want to read and want to learn about that.
Oh, the other nice thing in the section was probably if you're using DynamoDB local, you can use Particle now with that. That's PartiQL with DynamoDB local. So if you're in that bucket, then you too can join the Particle club. I think we're ready to talk about the most exciting section, aren't we, Arjen? Because we know it's got a reference to my favorite product in it.
Yep, we always know that you're excited about AI and ML, and well, take it away, Guy. Tell us about Deep Composer's Transformer notebook.
No, I refuse. But I will say the one from this section I do think is interesting is the Lookout for Vision, which is now generally available. So that was the service that I think was released at reInvent.
Yes, correct. Yes,
and this is the sort of anomaly detection for essentially for like assembly lines. It's using computer vision to find defects in products essentially. So that's now GA.
Yeah, automating quality inspection with ML backing that up. So yeah, nice product. I wonder what type of camera do they need? You need 4K or something to have high resolution to be able to do it properly.
Yeah, it might be surprisingly low res. I mean, I guess it depends on what it is they're scanning.
I mean, DeepLens wasn't exactly high quality.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. There's a lot you can do with 1080p, I think, probably. But yeah, Arjen, tell us about Deep Composer, please. What's this new Transformer notebook on GitHub? Has it got anything to do with the Transformers, like more than meets the eye?
Unfortunately, it doesn't. It's not more than meets the eye.
Okay.
It doesn't change into trucks or fancy things like that.
Well, I'm out then.
But interestingly, in the announcement, what they talk about, the Transformer is a state-of-the-art model that works with sequential data, such as genomic data or stock prices. Obviously, that is not what it's used for in Deep Composer, but it allows you to iteratively extend a melody to create new and long compositions. So where before Deep Composer would just let you add extra instruments to your piece of music, now you can actually make it add a whole piece to it, which I'm sure that you guys hate even more.
It does sound a little bit like it's stop it, you're just making it worse.
It sounds, this actually makes it sound more like what you thought it did instead of what it actually did.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I think that most of the knowledge I have about Deep Composer comes from the initial announcement when they got that guy out on stage playing a guitar over the top of some random noise that was supposedly Deep Composer had created. But you couldn't really hear it because it was just that guy singing and playing his guitar over the top of it, which was, I think that was cheating myself. But anyway, as I said, like I'd never let, coming to grips with reality interrupt me having a good time at the expense of Deep Composer, Arjen. So, don't harsh my vibe by telling me it's actually not that bad. I'm not interested, okay?
Shall we have a look at other cool stuff?
All the cool stuff, yeah.
Not a lot here, but I think the top one is actually really interesting for people.
Yeah.
Which is the Amazon CloudFront Security Savings Bundle.
So it's essentially RIs for CloudFront, right?
Yep. It's basically RIs for CloudFront, plus you get a bit of web savings added to it as well. So in essence, what it comes down to, even though it's described differently, is you get a 30% discount on your CloudFront if you reserve into the future for, I believe it's 1 or 3 years. And in addition, you get 10% of that same on your web savings.
Yeah.
So as an example, so you need to commit for a monthly spend for 1 year term, yes. So if you commit for $70, for example, for CloudFront, you will get $100 of CloudFront, which is a 30% discount. So you get more than what you pay. And then you get 10% of this $70 means $7 of WAF charges. So you don't get 10% of your WAF, you just get a value of the WAF request. So a bit complex calculation, but it's good to have rebates. And that includes Lambda Edge as well, which is quite expensive when you run it at scale. And just encourage you to use WAF on top of your CloudFront. So it's good.
It's interesting that Lambda Edge falls under this instead of
the compute part, yeah. It's come with your CloudFront costing, yes.
Yeah. So great, and let's just use it.
An announcement for Control Tower, always some improvement there. So the old version of Control Tower is 2.3. There was a set region numbers, and now AWS has been adding more region last month. So you can add more region if you want to be able to control this region, or if you don't want to, then you need to upgrade to the version 2.6 of Control Tower, which has an upgrade background. Takes around an hour to do, but then you can decide to don't integrate this region into your Control Tower space. However, these regions are not checked, so you better have some other type of rule, SCPs or something, to block this region. Otherwise, Control Tower won't even look at them. You save a bit of cost because you don't have to install CloudFormation template for this region or AWS config for this region, but still, you will need to block them a certain way. What you cannot do is to remove them. Once you are adding a region to Control Tower, you can't remove them. So you can't go back in time and say, I don't want that Mumbai region or Singapore region anymore. When it's added. You can't remove it.
Cool.
Other thing, I know, Guy, how much you love talking about workmail.
Well, I actually use workmail, so I'm the guy. I'm the one who's got a workmail account.
I really hope you automatically switch between dark modes.
Now you can have a Lambda function who going to inject stuff, scan stuff, remove attachment, and all of that. You can use Lambda to do what Exchange used to do.
I know.
Remember?
Yeah.
The old Exchange rules you had, adding stuff, images, and scanning.
Yep, I will very excitedly run off and do that. No, so there is a use case for this, of course, if a company is actually using workmail as their outsourced exchange or SaaS, exchange as a service type thing, which is essentially what it is, I guess. And they want to do things like automatically attach a footer to every email, or some places they put a thing on the top to say this email came from an external address. That sort of stuff, I imagine, is what this will allow you to do.
Yep. And being able to do it through Lambda means that the workmail team didn't have to build that capability themselves.
There you go. Win-win. Yeah. And the last announcement, it seems like we're tapering off. Amazon SNS now supports 1 minute CloudWatch metrics.
Yeah. It was 5 minutes before. Now it's 1 minute. Yeah.
Which actually leads us very nicely to the topic of the Nanos. So what's your candidate, Arjen, for the smallest, most insignificant announcement of the month? And it was in a month where it was a tight pack because there's a lot of insignificant announcements in this one. Yeah,
I went again to the mobile parts of AWS with support for new regions in the AWS console mobile application.
But when you look at them, they are very old regions, like Hong Kong, Bahrain, Milan, Cape Town. Cape Town is relatively new, but why Hong Kong was not there before?
Yeah, this is... it's crazy that this took so long shows that we really need a better mobile application. If only we knew somebody who was building one of those.
Oh, yeah.
So, Rob, if you're listening...
hurry up.
Yeah, AWS need help.
Yeah. All right. So I had a quick scan back through, and yeah, it's a difficult one to pick a Nano for this, and it's probably a little unfair. This one, there's probably a big audience for it actually. But since we're in Australia, I thought it was a Nano. Amazon Pinpoint now supports 10 DLC and toll-free numbers. It's only in the US, and it just kind of seemed pretty boring anyway. Yeah, and it's Pinpoint, so I'm sure there's a whole group of people who are super excited about this, but I wasn't. So it's my candidate, and I don't care if you're excited.
Okay. And JM, did you have some?
I agree. The console mobile application, I think it's pretty sad. And then the SNS 1 minute, yeah, that might be useful for some things, but it's just a cloud metrics at the end. It's not even the service itself. So.
But look, altogether, it's a solid effort from AWS. I think we give them a C for February. What do you reckon?
Yeah, March seems to be very interesting too, but we'll see what happens.
It's still very early in March.
Well, maybe if they get their C from us, they might just go, oh, the guys, they're not impressed. We better pull out some big ones for March. Otherwise, they'll lose interest and they might just all fall asleep and start making podcasts about falling asleep instead.
Yep, which brings me nicely to the reminder of my new podcast. So it's called Arjen Without Sleep. As I said, you can find it on the website and in your podcast player of choice. And other than that, I will end us for today, and I will thank, as always, our sponsors, Enabler, the user group's gold sponsor, and our silver sponsors, AC3, CMD, and Do It International. Of course, I also want to thank our listeners, all of you who stuck with us and didn't fall asleep yet. Thank you.
Where?
I would have wanted to thank Guy, but it sounds like he's busy crying.
Pleasure, Arjen, and it's always nice to do these things and to learn things from you guys, because you are mighty.
And JM, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Arjen. Thank you, Guy. Always fun to discuss the news with you and talk about AWS. Looking forward for next month.
Cool. And with that, goodbye, everyone. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
Bye.